They will call it loneliness. They will tell you that connection is power. But behind every smiling face lies a hand ready to pull your strings. In this world, if you do not master solitude, you will be mastered by manipulation. In the theater of human affairs, few realize how easily the need for belonging becomes the leash around their neck. The masses cling to company, mistaking noise for warmth and dependence for loyalty. Yet the man who cannot stand alone is already conquered. Isolation is not retreat. It is refinement. It is the forge where the mind becomes sharper than deceit and where the will is purified of emotional debts. Power, after all, does not dwell among the crowds. It is born in the silence where you face yourself without the comforting lies of others. They call it friendship. They call it love, loyalty, community. But beneath every smile, there hides a transaction. And behind every handshake, an invisible negotiation of power. You believe you connect with others out of sincerity. Yet in truth, most connections exist to fill a void, not to share strength. The hungry do not seek company. They seek feeding. Ask yourself this: when you reveal your fears to someone, do they listen out of care or curiosity? When they comfort you, are they protecting you? Or protecting their image of being good? Human connection, for most, is a contract of weakness disguised as warmth. In the courts of Renaissance Florence, every ally was also a potential betrayer. The merchant smiled at the noble, not out of friendship, but calculation. Each word, each favor, each dinner invitation was a chess move, designed to corner, not to connect. And yet, the common man still believed in the purity of companionship. The wise did not. He watched. He listened. He calculated the motives that others hid even from themselves. You see, man is an actor by nature. He performs kindness to gain trust, and humility to disarm suspicion. Even those who think themselves good use virtue as a currency. It buys them acceptance, admiration, and influence. And those who fail to see this game, they become its pawns. Modern life has only made the illusion more sophisticated. You think you have friends, but you have mirrors. Digital validation, social circles, endless chatter. These are just the modern disguises of dependency. You show your image to others, hoping they will reflect it back with approval. But when your worth depends on reflection, you lose the ability to see yourself directly. The manipulator understands this weakness well. He feeds it. He gives you attention when you crave it most. He agrees with you when you need to be right. He mirrors your emotions, then uses that mirror to guide your actions. You call him a friend. He calls you an investment. In politics, this illusion has destroyed kingdoms. Rulers who surrounded themselves with flatterers thought they were loved. They mistook smiles for loyalty, and loyalty for safety. But flattery is the perfume of betrayal. It smells sweet, until you realize it hides decay. Consider the fall of Emperor Nero. He believed he was adored because the court clapped at every word. They laughed when he demanded laughter, wept when he demanded sorrow. And yet, the moment his power weakened, those same loyal faces turned their knives inward. He had connection, yet no allies. He was surrounded, yet utterly alone. There lies the cruel paradox of human connection. The more you rely on it, the more you become its prisoner. Even in ordinary life, you can see it. The colleague who flatters your ideas so he can rise beside you. The friend who supports you until your success outshines theirs. The lover who claims they cannot live without you, not from love, but fear of insignificance. Every bond, in the end, is a negotiation of needs. Most people do not love you, they love what they gain from you. And you are guilty too. For you have done the same, perhaps unknowingly, seeking validation where you should have sought power. This is not condemnation, it is clarity. To see human nature clearly is to free yourself from its illusions. Ask yourself, if every connection in your life were tested by betrayal, who would remain? How many would stand by you without reward, without gain, without need? The answer will wound you, but it will also awaken you. The wise man does not shun connection, he studies it. He enters relationships with awareness, not faith. He listens to words but measures the motive beneath them. He shares his thoughts, but never his leverage. He gives others what they seek, while keeping what they could use against him. That is how he moves among the crowd without being owned by it. To master the illusion of connection is to master manipulation itself. You learn to see through the smiles, the sympathy, the praise, and to recognize the quiet hunger behind them all. Remember this: the one who appears surrounded by friends often hides the deepest fear, the fear of standing alone. And until you conquer that fear, every connection will be a chain disguised as comfort, because in the game of power, the man who needs others the most will always be the easiest to control. But what happens when solitude itself becomes your weapon? When isolation stops being loneliness and turns into dominance? That is where the second lesson begins. They told you isolation is weakness. That strength comes from belonging, from collaboration, from the warmth of others. But history whispers a different truth. That solitude is not exile. It is elevation. The greatest minds did not find clarity in the crowd. They found it in silence. Because silence reveals what noise conceals: intent, fear, truth. When you stand alone, you hear the faintest echoes of manipulation that others are too distracted to notice. You begin to see how society conditions men to confuse comfort with control. Ask yourself, when was the last time you were truly alone with your thoughts? Without distraction, without validation, without the digital applause of strangers. Did you feel peace or panic? That panic is the first sign of dependence, and dependence is the first chain of control. In solitude, that chain becomes visible. You start to see how much of what you call your identity was built from the opinions of others. Their praise sculpted your pride. Their disapproval shaped your fears. Their approval became your drug. But the moment you step away from the noise, the illusions begin to fracture. You start asking the forbidden questions. Who am I when no one is watching? Who am I when applause fades? Most people avoid these questions because they expose the uncomfortable truth. They are nothing without an audience. Throughout history, rulers understood this advantage. They used isolation not as retreat, but as strategy. They withdrew to observe the chessboard from above while their rivals drowned in chatter. Julius Caesar would often isolate himself before battle. While his generals argued over tactics, he sat alone, studying maps, calculating possibilities. It was not solitude that made him vulnerable. It was solitude that made him unpredictable. Because the isolated mind is no longer shaped by the collective. It becomes original. And originality, in a world of imitation, is power. When you are alone, no one feeds your ego. No one flatters your weakness. No one confirms your illusions. You meet yourself as you are, unfiltered, unprotected, and uncomfortably real. It is in that confrontation that strength is born. Think of the wolf who leaves the pack. They say he is banished, but often he leaves by choice. He hunts alone, learns to adapt, and becomes sharper than those who rely on the pack's protection. When he returns, he is no longer one of them. He is above them. That is the nature of solitude. It transforms dependency into dominance. Psychologically, isolation strips away the false layers of identity. It breaks the feedback loop that tells you who to be. You stop mirroring the world, and the world begins to mirror you. But beware. True solitude is not mere absence of people. It is the discipline to think independently while among them. You may walk through the crowd, speak their language, even smile, but your mind must remain your own territory. This inner distance gives you an advantage that others cannot detect. While they react emotionally, you respond strategically. While they seek approval, you analyze motives. While they fear judgment, you calculate outcomes. It is the same principle that kept certain rulers unshaken in storms of betrayal. They built an inner fortress. One that no rumor, no rejection, no manipulation could penetrate. You must do the same. In solitude, your emotions cool into instruments. Anger becomes energy. Fear becomes foresight. Pain becomes precision. And as the noise of the world fades, a dangerous calm takes its place. A calm that others mistake for detachment, but which is in fact control. The manipulator loses power over you because you no longer crave his approval. He cannot sway your emotions because you have mastered them in the silence of your own company. This is why solitude terrifies the weak. It leaves them alone with their untrained minds. They seek constant company because company keeps them numb. But you, if you dare, can turn solitude into your weapon. When you walk away from the crowd, you do not lose influence. You refine it. You concentrate it. You make your presence more deliberate, your absence more valuable. The man who is comfortable in isolation becomes a mystery to others. And mystery, in the game of power, is currency. Because people cannot manipulate what they do not understand. And they cannot control what they cannot reach. So remember this: to detach is not to abandon the world. It is to see it clearly, to operate within it without being consumed by it. The crowd reacts. The solitary man decides. And when the time comes to return, your silence will speak louder than their noise. But solitude is only the foundation. To maintain control, you must understand the weapon your enemies use best: your own emotions. That is where the next lesson begins. They do not need to chain you to control you. They only need to make you feel. Emotions are the invisible strings of manipulation. Pull the right one, and even the strongest man will move like a puppet. You think you choose your loyalties. You think your love, your anger, your compassion are pure. But the truth is darker. Most of what you feel was installed in you by someone who wanted something. Ask yourself, who benefits from your emotions? When you are angry, who gains power over your reaction? When you are afraid, who profits from your obedience? When you crave love, whose control do you submit to just to feel safe again? Emotional dependency is the oldest tool of power. The church ruled through guilt. Kings ruled through fear. Lovers rule through affection. The method changes, but the essence remains: control the feeling, and the mind follows. You can conquer an army with swords, but you can conquer a man with approval. Look through history, and you'll see it repeated endlessly. Caesar did not hold Rome with force alone. He held it with admiration. His soldiers would die for him, not because of his orders, but because he made them feel honored to serve. And when Brutus betrayed him, it wasn't strength that defeated Caesar. It was emotional blindness. He could predict every strategy except the betrayal of the heart. Emotional attachment clouds logic. The closer someone is to you, the more power they have to steer your actions. They praise you when they want compliance. They withdraw affection when they want correction. You call it love. They call it leverage. And this pattern repeats in every arena: political, personal, social. The manipulator studies your emotions like a musician studies notes. He learns which tone produces obedience, which memory triggers guilt, which smile makes you yield. Soon, he does not need to demand anything. You offer it willingly, believing it's your choice. Modern manipulators no longer wear crowns or armor. They wear charm, empathy, and understanding. They tell you what you long to hear. They present themselves as saviors, as soulmates, as guides. But behind that warmth lies cold calculation. Think of the toxic lover who withholds affection to make you chase their approval. Each apology you offer, each explanation you give, binds you tighter. You start to fear losing them more than you fear losing yourself. And that fear becomes the cage. Or consider the superior at work who praises you just enough to keep you loyal, but never enough to make you secure. You stay late, you give more, you exhaust yourself, all to preserve an illusion of worth that he controls. You believe you are choosing to please him, but in truth, he has trained you to. This is the genius of emotional manipulation. It makes you police yourself. The manipulator doesn't need to force obedience. He makes you want it. Understand this: control over emotions is control over perception, and perception shapes reality. That is why those who master their emotions become immune to domination. They cannot be provoked, guilted, or seduced into submission. Their calm becomes a weapon, unnerving those who seek to control them. But this mastery demands a cruel discipline. You must learn to observe your emotions without obeying them. You must stand outside your anger, your love, your fear, and see who benefits from their existence. Ask yourself, who gains when I feel guilt? Who thrives when I feel pity? Who wins when I react instead of respond? Once you answer those questions, you begin to see the architecture of control that surrounds you. The manipulator thrives only as long as you remain emotionally reactive. He feeds on your empathy, your desire to be seen as good, your fear of loss. But when you withdraw that power, when you stop giving your emotions freely, his influence withers. This is why detachment is not cruelty, it is armor. To care selectively is to remain in control of your compassion. To love consciously is to never become a slave to love. The world calls such men cold, but they mistake discipline for emptiness. To feel deeply yet remain unmoved, that is true strength. You are not meant to kill emotion, but to command it. To feel anger and choose silence. To feel love and still walk away when respect dies. To feel fear yet act as if you do not. That is how kings are made. That is how manipulators lose their grip. Because once your emotions serve only you, no one can use them against you again. But emotional independence alone is not enough. To survive the world of deceit, you must build something far stronger, an inner fortress that no betrayal can touch. That is where the next lesson begins. A ruler who depends on the loyalty of others builds his kingdom on sand. A man who depends on external validation builds his identity on fog. Both collapse at the first storm. True power does not require walls, armies, or alliances. It requires autonomy. The kind that cannot be stolen, betrayed, or seduced away. The kind that exists even when everything else is stripped from you. You have seen men lose their composure over a rumor. You have seen leaders crumble when their followers turn silent. You have seen the strongest warriors break down when love abandons them. Why? Because they built their fortresses outside themselves. They trusted the loyalty of others instead of their own discipline. They depended on admiration rather than awareness. And so, when the winds of fortune shifted, their power vanished with it. In the chaos of Renaissance politics, kingdoms were built and destroyed not by armies, but by insecurity. A prince who ruled by fear alone was fragile. The one who ruled by respect, anchored in himself, endured. Autonomy was his armor. You, too, live among shifting alliances. Only now they come in subtler forms: friends who mirror convenience, colleagues who praise for advantage, lovers who promise eternity until the moment it stops serving them. Each one holds a key to your emotions. Each one, if not carefully guarded against, can breach your defenses. But autonomy changes everything. It means you do not crumble when approval fades. You do not seek worth in reflection. You remain steady even when surrounded by deceit. The autonomous man moves differently. He listens, but is not persuaded by flattery. He observes, but reveals little. He accepts solitude not as punishment, but as sovereignty. Ask yourself, how much of your life is controlled by fear of disapproval? How many choices have you made not because they were wise, but because you feared judgment? That fear is the crack in your fortress wall, and every manipulator looks for it. A skilled deceiver does not need to overpower you. He only needs to influence your emotions. He will appeal to your pride, to your guilt, to your hunger for recognition. And the moment you react, you give him entry. That is how kingdoms fall. And that is how individuals are conquered. History remembers those who built fortresses of stone, but forgets those who built fortresses of mind. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire beset by war and plague, yet his calm was unshaken. Why? Because his empire was not merely Rome. It was his inner dominion. No scandal, no betrayal, no loss of favor could dethrone him from himself. He understood what most never will, that peace is not found in safety, but in self-sufficiency. To build this fortress, you must begin by reclaiming ownership of your thoughts. The world wants to rent space in your mind. Through opinions, trends, and fear, evict them. Next, build emotional independence. When you feel anger, do not act. When you feel affection, do not surrender. When you feel despair, do not collapse. Hold every emotion like a sword, drawn when needed, sheathed when not. Finally, construct a code, your personal laws. They guide you when emotion clouds judgment. They remind you of who you are when others try to rewrite you. The man with a code cannot be bribed with comfort or threatened with isolation. His loyalty belongs to principle, not persuasion. That is true autonomy. But beware, the fortress you build within must not become a prison. Too much isolation turns strength into rigidity. A ruler who shuts his gates to all counsel soon drowns in his own echo. Autonomy is not the rejection of others. It is mastery over the influence they hold. It is the art of engaging without absorbing, of listening without bending, of standing among the crowd, untouched by its madness. When you reach this state, you will notice something strange. People will begin to respect you more, but trust you less. They will sense that you cannot be easily manipulated, that you are no longer emotionally available for their control. And that unnerves them, because nothing terrifies the dependent more than a man who cannot be owned. The autonomous mind is untouchable. It cannot be shamed, seduced, or intimidated into obedience. It owes loyalty only to reason and obedience only to truth. That is why those who possess this inner fortress rarely reveal it. They move quietly, think deeply, and let others waste their strength fighting invisible wars. They remain calm as others panic, patient as others rush, detached as others beg for belonging. The world calls them cold, but in truth, they are free. Yet even the freest mind must face one final trial: to use isolation, detachment, and autonomy not just to survive, but to rule. And that is where the next lesson begins. Power begins the moment you no longer fear standing alone. Because isolation is not absence, it is ascension. Most men seek company to escape their own minds. They cannot bear the silence that exposes their weakness. They drown their solitude in noise, distraction, and meaningless connection. But mastery begins where comfort ends. Ask yourself, when was the last time you were truly alone? Without a voice to reassure you, without a screen to distract you, without a friend to agree with you. Did you feel peace, or did you feel panic? That panic reveals the truth. Dependence hides where solitude begins. Throughout history, every great mind, philosopher, strategist, ruler, walked the same dark road of isolation. Not because they desired loneliness, but because greatness cannot share its thoughts with mediocrity. Leonardo da Vinci isolated himself for years, sketching his visions in silence while others mocked his obscurity. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations in solitude while surrounded by armies and deceit. And Machiavelli himself, exiled and forgotten, sharpened his mind alone, crafting insights that would outlive the empires that rejected him. Isolation refines what the crowd dilutes. It strips away illusion, dependence, and the emotional noise that clouds judgment. In solitude, you stop reacting. You begin observing. You begin thinking. That is the first step toward mastery. Because mastery is not learned, it is built. And it can only be built in silence. When you are alone, you discover how fragile your focus has become. You notice how easily the world controls you through urgency, temptation, and comparison. Every message, every headline, every opinion seeks to hijack your attention. But when you step away, you reclaim it. In that space, the mind stops echoing the thoughts of others and begins creating its own. That is when insight sharpens into vision. The path to mastery is not glamorous. It is long, quiet, and often brutal. You will face boredom, self-doubt, even despair. But those are not signs of weakness. They are signs of transformation. The weak flee them. The strong endure them. The master uses them. Isolation is the forge where the raw metal of the self is hammered into steel. Think of it as a crucible. You enter it fragmented and dependent. You emerge disciplined, precise, and untouchable. But understand this: true isolation is not physical distance. It is mental separation. You can live among thousands and still walk alone in thought. That is the highest form of solitude, moving through the crowd without being part of it. When the crowd celebrates, you analyze. When the crowd fears, you observe. When the crowd follows, you decide. This detachment gives rise to something rarer: self-command. The ability to act not out of emotion, but out of design. Most people never achieve this. They live reactive lives, enslaved by circumstance. They say, "I had no choice," because they have never learned to rule themselves. The master, however, knows that control begins inward. He does not seek to dominate others until he has dominated his own impulses. He does not seek victory until he has conquered his need for validation. This is the paradox of isolation. The more you detach from others, the more influence you gain over them. Why? Because while they crave attention, you appear indifferent. And indifference is power. It confuses, intimidates, and attracts all at once. People are drawn to the one who does not need them. They trust his composure, respect his silence, and fear his unpredictability. He becomes a mirror for their insecurities, a reminder of the strength they lack. You must learn to embody that silence, to let solitude polish your presence until every word you speak carries weight, to let absence make your value undeniable, because the one who masters isolation no longer begs for recognition. He commands it. But isolation, if misunderstood, can destroy as easily as it empowers. It can harden the heart, distort perspective, and breed arrogance. The same silence that strengthens the disciplined will consume the aimless. So how do you walk this razor's edge? How do you remain detached without becoming hollow? How do you stand apart without losing your humanity? That is the final trial of mastery. To balance control with connection, strategy with soul. To use solitude not to escape the world, but to rule yourself before re-entering it. Because the ultimate purpose of isolation is not withdrawal. It is preparation. You retreat to sharpen your weapon, not to abandon the battlefield. You learn to govern your inner world so that the outer world can no longer govern you. And when you return, calm, clear, and untouchable, you no longer move with the crowd. The crowd moves with you. But to turn that inner mastery into influence, to bend the world itself to your will, you must understand how power operates beyond isolation, and that is where the next lesson begins. Power does not always roar. Often it whispers, through influence disguised as understanding, through guidance that feels like choice. To control people without them knowing is not witchcraft. It is psychology sharpened into strategy. You do not command, they volunteer. You do not demand loyalty, you engineer it. The crowd believes they act freely, yet every motion serves your design. That is the essence of silent domination, making obedience feel like autonomy. Ask yourself, how many around you are already being steered, smiling as they march where another mind leads them? And more importantly, are you the one being guided or the one guiding? Remember, the most dangerous manipulator is not the loud tyrant. It is the quiet architect of desire. Learn that craft, and you will never need to beg for power again. If this reflection stirred something within you, leave your thoughts below. Subscribe for more Machiavellian insights, and share this message so others may awaken or remain your pawns.